Contemplate the workings of the inner being. Your eyes are wide open, but are you really seeing?
What is racism? And racism is an oppressive structure that is derogatory. It puts a particular race down or races down, and it causes another race to benefit. And I know it's sounding a little redundant, but this is how I go through my process. So the awareness of racism as a system is important. The awareness of how your human body is programmed to perform in many systems on autopilot, and it does perform in a racist paradigm on autopilot, and that goes for the people who are the oppressors and the people who are the oppressed. It's really important to recognize that. So, me being a black person who has light skin, I have a very particularly interesting dynamic of how I perform within a system of racism. And I know that I am oppressed by white people. I know that I'm oppressed by the system. And white people participate in that system for the fortification of that oppression. And I'm not saying all white people, but there are white people who do perform in it. And so it's really recognizing where I am with that. Also recognizing that since I have lighter skin than most black people that people associate as being black, I have particular privileges that darker skinned people do not have. And this is something that I've actually witnessed my entire life. I've actually participated in that privilege, and I've actually used it to the benefit of people who are darker than me. So this is a space of awareness, and that's all I'm asking people to do in this particular phase of the work that we're doing, is to bring an awareness to where you are performing. Are you performing from a space that you know and recognize? Do you see how people are being oppressed? Do you see if you're participating in the oppression? Do you see your privilege in that space? Just do you notice it? And that's it. Are you aware of what's going on? Are you aware? I'm not asking people to do anything in this phase of what we're of the work. It's just bringing an awareness, and the awareness of your body sensations when you walk in a room and a person of a different race, different ethnicity, different gender. Can you be aware of how your body responds to this space? If I'm a man and if a woman walks in the room, I notice my posture shift. It always shifts when a woman walks into the room because I'm always sizing somebody up. We all do it, whether we are aware of it or not. I'm always sizing somebody up. Is this person nice or mean? Is this person a potential sex partner? Can this person cook? Can this person work? Is this person smart? Is this person what? I am appraising the situation, and this is called the discrimination. And so, are you aware of how you discriminate? Are you aware of the discrimination techniques that you have and that you've developed as a human being? Are you aware of this stuff? And are you aware in how it feels in your body? It's a real important space to start to explore when you're digging into the racism space. This includes religion, ethnicity, skin tone, physical attributes. Are people injured? Do you consider them handicapped, or do you consider them disabled? What do you consider people in your day-to-day situation? And that's bringing awareness. And so once you start to bring your awareness of how you interact with people of other races, you can start to see how you interact with people of all different variables. So this isn't really just about racism. This is about inclusivity. And when you start to learn that you have been excluding people, you'll start to see how you can include people. You've got to be aware of it first. And that's the absolute first space. So after that, are you aware of how privilege works? How people how you may be privileged, how other people may be on the other end of your privilege, being oppressed by your privilege. Have you been aware of it? Are you aware of how supremacy works? The idea that there's an overarching something that is above something else. So when you think about religions, there are many religions, especially let's speak about Christianity for a second, that has the idea that there is a supreme being. And I'm not saying there is or isn't. I'm just making an example. There's an idea that there's a supreme being, and that being is what everything else derives from. So that is supremacy. There is something that is supreme and above all else, right? And so when you consider a system like racism, the ideas around supremacy bring in the idea that white in the white supremacy realm of supremacy, that white people are above all, and that everything else is a trickle down or derivative from or less than whiteness. And so when you start to see how that works, you can start to understand where privilege comes from, right? And, are you aware of how racism is dynamic, whether you see it, feel it, or believe in it or not? It is still here. And that's like, I've had people say, well, I don't experience racism, so it's not real, it doesn't exist. And so when people say these things to me, I ask them, well, do you recognize that poverty exists? And they'll go, sure. Well, I'm like, have you ever experienced poverty? No, but you know it exists. So the acknowledgement of it is part of awareness. And just because racism may not affect you directly, as far as being oppressed, or you're not directly oppressing somebody, does not mean it doesn't exist. And so that is part of that phase, right? So we go from awareness to consideration to validation. That validation phase is the actual acknowledgement that somebody else's truths are true. So that's a whole other situation. So are you aware of how every human body is attuned to see the individual qualities of skin color? And when people say I don't see color, it becomes a really dysfunctional place, because you do see color. Unless you're colorblind, or unless you see in black and white or grayscale, you do see color. And to say that actually denies the acknowledgement of another person. And so burping it up. And so are you aware of that space of not seeing color? Are you aware that this stuff this stuff is actual? Are you aware that you are discriminating right now? Right now you're discriminating. If you're looking at me and you're like, oh, this guy has a shirt on, no shirt on. Why does he have no shirt on Instagram Live? You're discriminating. You are doing, you're delineating between what is normal, what is acceptable, what you like, what you don't like. You are discriminating. And let's remove the negativity from discrimination. It is a phase of how you delineate things. And when you can really see that discrimination is the lead point, you can move into awareness. We all discriminate. When I walk into a room, I discriminate if the room is big or small. If the room is hot or cold, do I feel like being here or do I feel like leaving? Those are the spaces of discrimination. And so when we move into the awareness space, it's really about learning what your discrimination is, learning what your interactions are, learning what your body feels like, and really learning all of these things. And are you aware of, if you're talking about being a person who's looking to dismantle racism, are you aware of why you're looking to dismantle racism? Are you looking to dismantle racism because you truthfully care? Or are you looking to dismantle racism because it's convenient for you again? Because you don't want people to shut you out? Because there's a lot of virtual signaling going on. Are you looking to be safe from the witch hunts around racism? Why are you looking to dismantle racism? Are you aware of all of this? And so this is a small part of the awareness phase of what we're talking about, what we're going to be talking about in Rated R, which is are you being rated as a racist? Have you been rated as a racist? And so on. And so the next phase, right? So again, I'm going to repeat those steps, and my boards are getting moved around. You move from awareness to consideration to validation to invitation to observation to collaboration. That's the steps that we move people through in this program. And so the next thing is consideration. In order to see the depth of how something is affected by something else, you must consider all things and all perspectives. And to have a limited perspective allows for blind spots. And so have you considered your interaction with racism? Have you considered why you participate in the system the way you do? Have you considered what makes you oblivious to the situation? Have you considered what makes you interact with the people that you interact with? If you only interact with a certain race, or if your family is limited to this, or you only speak this language, have you considered what put you where you are? Have you deeply considered it? Have you considered why you feel the way you feel? Have you considered what makes you laugh? Have you considered what makes you cry? Have you considered what makes you angry in regards to race? Have you considered what makes you feel the way you do? Have you considered not only yours, but the feelings and the ideas of the people around you? Have you considered those situations of the people around you? And once you've moved into that space of consideration and start to really dig, you can start to really make more sense of, man, I never considered that before. Let me ask some more questions so you can broaden your perspective. And once you broaden your perspective, you start to include more perspective. And if we're talking about inclusivity, right, we're talking about being inclusive, because that's what this program is about. It's about learning inclusivity. There's a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion going on in the world in a lot of programs and stuff. I'm talking about inclusive. We can have diversity and we can have equity, but if you're not including everything, I believe you're doing the world a grave disservice. And so when you have that consideration for somebody else and you're bringing their perspective online, you are actually being inclusive. And so if we're going to talk about being inclusive, then let's be inclusive. And I've talked to a lot of people who are DEI, and that's diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Those are the people who work in companies and to help people in corporations to have diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're still being exclusive of people, or they still won't hear people because of they're speaking in racist terms and all of this stuff. And so when you understand why a person operates from a space of racist tendencies, or why they believe they operate that, it allows them to be more inclusive of your perspective, so things can come together. Ask people questions. Most people that I've experienced that operate from paradigms of racism have no idea it's the norm. I didn't know that saying I have black friends is a racist thing. It's not that it's a racist thing, it's a racism paradigm. It is a paradigm that is exclusive. So it's like, look, I have lots of friends, and I have my black friends. That is exclusive. You're excluding them from the main group by partitioning them. I've yet to hear any white person come to me and say, I have plenty of white friends. Never, ever, ever. And I'm just saying that about white people is just one example. I've never heard Asian people walk around and say, hey, I have plenty of Asian friends. I have had black people come to me and say, man, I got plenty of black friends. I've heard all of it, but I never hear white people say, I have plenty of white friends. I have plenty of black friends. I've got Asian friends. I've got this. This is the idea that we are separate. This is the idea that there is an exclusion. So when you are able to just consider how you've got to where you are, how you're performing, how you think, you become aware of yourself. And when you are aware, it leads you into a space where you are a sovereign being. And if we're talking about being woke and we're talking about being aware, this is the space of inclusivity we're talking about. We're talking about really getting people to be in a space where they are including not just other people from a conceptual space, but other people from a real welcome space. All of them, not just their bodies, but their vantage points and their considerations and their awarenesses. So when we include these things, it's really important. And when we're building companies and corporations, when we're building things to serve humanity, right? Not just white folks, or not just black folks, or not just Asian folks. We're serving humanity. We've got to be able to include this. And so this inclusion brings a space of curiosity. And when you have that curiosity space, awareness is the key point of really being aware of your own space and being curious about the spaces outside of you, being curious about the spaces deeply inside of you. And once you have that space, you can move on to the you are in the consideration space. So awareness leads into consideration. It's a flawless transition. Once you are aware, you can consider. Considering things without awareness is kind of like eating French fries without potatoes. It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes I have shitty metaphors, but what can I tell you? So when you consider things, you want consider how an oppressed person perceives racism, and how it applies or doesn't apply to that person. Can you consider how a person perceives that racism exists and how they experience things? Can you consider that? And can you consider how a person who perceives that racism doesn't exist experiences things? Can you lean into that space? There's a lot of intolerance I've found particularly with white folks, is that if a person doesn't believe that they are acting in a space of racism dynamics, that you know what, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm cutting you out. I'm taking you off my Facebook page. I'm not talking to you. And the person's like, why are you cutting me off for? I'm not a racist. I don't. This is a shame tactic, and this is the one of the things that we are really stressing in this program is the shame devices that come online with witch hunts, with throwing people under the bus, with virtual signaling, and all of these things that are in vogue right now. Is that once you shame somebody, it does not change their underlying paradigm. Once you cut somebody off, it doesn't change their underlying paradigm. It causes them to fight or run away and hide. And when you do that, you activate a person's nervous system. And when you activate a person's nervous system in a space where it's fight or flight, the logic space does not get to come online very well. And once logic and reason are suppressed, a person stays in the space, they hide, or they go find people who are in a very similar space where they do feel safe, and then they fortify that type of situation. So it's really important when you're considering these things is, is my behavior around racism, virtue signaling? Is my behavior around witch hunting? Is my behavior around finger pointing and diagnosing as racist functional? Can you consider that? That's another consideration to bring into the space around your places with racism. If you're looking to dismantle racism, are you considering this stuff? It's a very complex. It's very complex to be a human and very complicated to be in a system of racism, and it causes a lot of friction. And so that is the second space, the space of consideration. And from consideration, moving into a space of validation. And validation is actually, once you become aware of your feelings and once you've observed the awareness of other people, once you've considered why you are the way you are, what made you the way you are, and the other people around you the way you are, once you've considered these things, you don't even have to discuss it. Once you've considered these things, you move into the space of validation. And when you move into a space of validation, it's a space where we discuss relative truth. And I have a whole thing that I wrote called Todd's Theory of Relative Truth. And to put it in a nutshell, the idea of relative truth is that there is only one absolute truth, and that is all truth is relative. And even that absolute truth is relative depending upon a person's perspective. So my truth is very true for me until it's not anymore. Your truth is very true to you until it's not true anymore. Cole's truth is very true to her until it's not true anymore. And that is a very important place to remember. Until it's not true anymore. So how many times have you believed something and then you found out that's not what it is, and you let it go and you moved into a new space of believing? That is relative truth. And when you can move into those spaces of relative truth and start to understand these things, validation of another person's truth is very, very important. When somebody, I've had people come to me and say, black people ain't shit. They ain't never going to be shit. I've had family members that are black tell me that black people ain't shit and ain't never going to be shit. Okay? And I'm not going to get into the names and the who's and the where's and all of this stuff. This is stuff that's real. And so there are people who believe. Like I have very close personal friends and family members whose parents told them that they ain't shit and ain't never going to be shit. And no matter how successful they are, they believe it. And until they believe otherwise, they will continue to believe it. And I honor, listen, okay, cool. You don't believe your shit? Can you tell me why? I don't say, oh, no, that's not true, because now I'm invalidating somebody else's truth. And when I invalidate somebody else's truth, it pulls them out of a space of really being able to understand how important their truth is and how valid it is and how real it is in the moment. And no matter what you say about a person's truth, you can pull a person out of their experience of themselves by invalidating their truth. And if you want to get intimate, and like I said at the beginning of this, our whole program is about intimacy. There is no inclusion without intimacy. And so if you're going to get intimate with someone and you shut them down, you shut down their truth. You shut a person's truth down, it's going to activate the nervous system, and then it's a physiological thing. You're denying a person their identity, you're denying a person their belief about themselves, and it causes anger device to come online. And when the anger device comes online, it activates the fight or flight space on your body. You're either going to run from that attack or you're going to attack that attack. One or the other. And so which is it going to be? But I can tell you one space it's not going to be a space of rational discussion. It's not going to be a space of logistics. It's going to be a space of, I got to get out of here. I got to fight this off. And so the amount of logic that you can pull up is going to be very limited. It's going to be very brain-based, not mind-based. And in our program, we get into brain versus mind, right? We get into the contrast between the two. They work together, not the same thing. And if you want to dive into that, we can dive into that. Join the Rated R program, and we'll talk about it. And you can join this program and talk about this stuff, but this will apply to everything in your life, not just racism. And so when you start to understand that the validation of another person's truth, the validation of your own truth is absolutely paramount in understanding how to dismantle something like racism. And I'm not talking about dismantle racism worldwide. I'm talking about dismantling it within the self. I'm talking about dismantling it within the structure of your business. I'm talking about dismantling racism from a space of awareness. And when you can have that awareness and start to consider things and then start to validate all the truths, validate them, just validate them. You don't have to agree with it, but you can validate that someone else's truth is true for them. And once you do that, their nervous system can relax because you are actually acknowledging them as a human being. And when you look into the imagination space and you deny somebody their truth about themselves, it's going to cause them to react and respond in a space where they are fighting against your denial of who they are. So pointing fingers and calling people racist is a space that does not validate them as an individual. So I just want to that's the next space. So once you move from validation, you move into the space of observation, right? And when you move into the observation space, now that you've been able to be aware and you've been able to consider and validate everybody's truth, right, including your own, now is the space of observation where you sit back and you observe. You observe how these dynamics that you've unearthed in yourself are flowing in the world around you. You observe how your body works. You observe how your business works and how the people that interact with your business work, how your clientele works, how all of the people you're dealing with are working, how your body is jiving with things. Do you need my
What?
Do you need the camera on this to record the video? Oh, you're good. Okay. Anyway, when you so you move into the observation space, and when you move into the observation phase, it's look, listen, and feel. And so you're looking to see if you can observe the things that are happening with you and your family, right? And oh man, like wow, this is really happening, right? That awareness is now wow. You're observing yourself, and you're listening. And you're listening to the inflection in people's voices and how things change when different people and different ethnicities walk into the room. You look at how different people posture and different people act, and you feel. What does your body feel like when people walk through the room? You now have a greater space of awareness. So the observation space is an expanded space of awareness. So you actually swing back around into the awareness and you expand that awareness through observing. And when we show people how to observe, we show people how to observe from a full body space. So you're observing the facial expressions of other people. You're observing your own body and you're feeling your face. You're feeling your body temperature, the temperature of the room. You're looking at people's nervousness, if they're tapping things, if they're scratching. You're looking and observing everything. And you're just starting to build that awareness. And once you start to have that awareness even deeper, you start to invite people. You start to create a plan around what you want to do to shift yourself into a space where you're dismantling racism within yourself or within your business paradigms or whatever in your family situation. And you start to create a plan around that. And you start to create a plan where you're going to invite other people in. Hey, listen, I noticed something about me and I want some help with it. So if you see me speak in this manner, if you see me speak in a derogatory way or hear me speak in a derogatory way, or if you see my languaging start to represent something that may be oppressive to other people, I want you to let me know. Can you let me know? And once you get into the space where you're letting with some other people letting you know, ask them, hey, do you mind if I do this with you? And so you have this invitation where you invite them to utilize you, you utilize them, and there's a back and forth that also reinforces the awareness space, which reinforces the consideration, which reinforces the observation and the validation and the observation. All of those spaces get reinforced, and so you move back into that invitation space and you shift it to collaboration. And that's when you start to collaborate with other people. And the collaborative space when you're looking to do this is bringing your family members online, bringing your friends with you, bringing your business partners with you, and starting to really see where these places are. And then you start to intermingle with people of other ethnicities, other races, other spaces. I always recommend that people move into these spaces with themselves and people who they've been akin to and they've been dealing with on a day-to-day basis, so that their nervous systems are in a comfortable space, so that when they're looking to collaborate outside of that space, there is a space of connection, mutual empathy, and intimacy. And so that collaboration space is fostering the intimacy, it's fostering the mutual empathy and the collaboration and the connection between people. And once we start to have that is where the intimacy space dwells, and we start to move into the creation of deeper intimacy with human beings. And that is the space where inclusivity, where inclusion dwells, is that intimacy space. And so from there we move into a really awesome space. And so this is a really wonderful paradigm that we help people to get into that space of intimacy. And this is actually the space where we're crafting intimacy. We're creating that space, that fill. And even before this, which is woven into this, we have something called the roadmap to intimacy. And the roadmap to intimacy is a wonderful space of being able to tolerate, accept, feel safe, be safe, know that you're safe, be vulnerable, and then connect. And that's where you have intimacy. And so this is something that we teach everybody in our program to do. We teach all of our clients to do this, regardless of rated R or anything. We teach people how to be intimate, firstly with the self, then with the closest person to you, and then with the closest people to you, and then outside of you. So moving from that, from that space of intimacy is really important. And then once we move through that intimacy space, and you have that intimacy space, that's when you crack open the awareness. So I'll go through that too. And so the roadmap to intimacy is one of physical tolerance. Can you tolerate yourself in that space, in any space, with a person, with yourself? Can you tolerate yourself physically somewhere to where you can actually stay there for more than 10 seconds, right? And once you can stay there, you can accept yourself in the space. You can accept yourself and know that it may be dangerous or not, whichever way you've accepted your situation. So it gets your nervous system to actually calm down so that you can actually perceive things greatly. And once you move into that space where you can perceive things greatly and you see that there's no immediate threat to yourself, you establish safety with yourself, right? I am safe in this space. And once you're safe in that space, you can open up vulnerability. And once you open up vulnerability, you have this space where you express yourself, your truths, right? So that's the truths that you'll be bringing out in the validation space. You express your truth, and then you accept your truth. That's a volley with yourself. Well, I feel this way. Yeah, I accept that. Well, I feel this way. Yeah, I accept that, and this makes sense to me, and whatever. You validate that, and so that vulnerability with yourself gives rise to the space of connection with the self. And when you connect with yourself on a really deep, intricate level, where you start to really get the who's, what's, where's, and why's together, that's when you become intimate with yourself. And the same thing applies when you're dealing with another person, when you're interacting with another person. You walk into a room, if somebody comes close to you or proximal, are you able to physically tolerate yourself? Can you position yourself to where you can physically tolerate yourself around another person? Place, idea, object, whatever, circumstance. It is intimacy that we're looking for. So once you can tolerate yourself in that space, can you accept yourself in that space? Once you accept yourself in that space, it allows you to actually check in and see, am I safe? Okay, cool. Is that person safe? Cool. There's a safety here. I'm going to open up vulnerability. Hey, man, do you like sports? The other person could be like, Nah, I don't like sports. So the other person opens up vulnerability back, right? Well, what do you like? Well, I like knitting. You like, no, well, yeah, I like knitting too. So let's talk about knitting. So you have back and forth vulnerability, right? I'm giving the shitty example, but whatever. So you have vulnerability that goes back and forth. There's a volley. It can be a verbal dialect. It can be written dialogue. It can be body language. It can be physical touch. That vulnerability is a back and forth situation. And once you have that back and forth situation of vulnerability, that is what we call connection. And once you have the connection space, you move into a space of deep, intricate connection, and that's intimacy. And that's what we're looking for. And when we're talking about racism, we're looking for people to be able to be inclusive of each other. And so when you can be intimate with somebody, and I'm not talking about sex, right? Because it is often misconstrued that intimacy is a sexual situation. Intimacy is an intricate connection. It is an intricacy. Okay, it is a weaving together of concept, ideas, feelings, time together, whatever, from a mutual space. Intimacy is a mutual situation. If you force someone to understand something, that is not intimacy. If you virtue signal and witch hunt someone into conforming is not intimacy. That is not inclusion. Conforming to something is being forced into something, yet another form of oppression. So when we look at these things, intimacy is the key aspect of what we are working with here, is being able to get people to really start to understand that intimacy is a mutual empathetic connection, right? A mutual empathetic interaction where the empathy is, I get it, yeah, and I get it, we get it, okay, cool. Your truth to this, my truth to this. Where do they meet or do they not meet? And can we move apart from each other without destroying one another because of our differences, because of our diversity, because of our discrimination? Can we do that? And so when we can include all people, that's when we have deep intimacy, and that's where the magic lies. And so this is what we are showing people in their businesses. This is what we're showing people in their personal lives. And this is what the Rated R program is about. It's about getting into these spaces, the progressions of intimacy. And so, deep intimacy on all levels, in progression with awareness, fosters cohesion and collaboration while fostering and maintaining sovereignty of the individual. Intimacy depth will be limited by the intricacy depth. So if you can't get intricate, your intimacy is going to be limited to how deep you can get intricate. And that is limited to where your physical body, your physical physiology will allow you to be in proximity. So again, that tolerance, acceptance, safety situation is really, really important. If you can't get up to the safety part, there's no way you're getting to the full vulnerability, which is radical honesty. There's no way that you're getting to the depth of intimacy that you could possibly have. And therefore, you have exclusion. And so when you have exclusion, it moves people into a space where they're excluded from each other, and we have exclusivity. And this is what racism thrives on. And so when we keep separating people, right, we have racist and anti-racist, and we don't have that pot of kind of the mixture of dynamics in the middle. We are polarizing things. And so when we polarize things, we keep people on one side or the other side. And in all of this stuff, all of the truths that are in here, all of the myriads of sensations and feelings that are in here in the middle do not get acknowledged. And so we have the polarities, and we have what I call the nolarity space, which is in the middle. And when you have that nolarity space, that's where the magic is. And the awareness or perceived depth of desire, or the level of depth, will influence the amount of intimacy you can have on all levels. And I know that's a bit of a mouthful, and so how could I put that in another way? Your awareness of the depth of how intimate you want to be is going to influence the level of intimacy you have with another person, how deeply you can know another person. And we have been pushed into a space in our world where it's like oh, that's just a friend. You're not supposed to know this about this person, or this is your lover. This is the only person you're supposed to be in the space with. Cole and I have worked with plenty of people on a relationship basis where they're sitting here and they're telling us that they have friends that they love and that they can tell anything to, but they can't tell their partner even 50% of the truth. So this is, who's controlling your levels of intimacy? Is it you as an individual, as a sovereign individual, or is it the construct of racism? Is it the construct of Americanism? Is it the construct of nationalism? Is it the construct of fascism? Is it the construct of ageism or sexism that's keeping you from performing the way you truly and deeply want to, the way you can consider? Have all of your thoughts been managed by some other system, by a family structure or whatever? Have you been moved out of that space? So, the progression of your individual identity in intimacy is really important, and understanding who you are as a person. Did you create who you are, or are you a mishmash of what your parents and your teachers and your friends and the television set and the news and CNN and MSNBC and all these other things have created your persona and who you think you should be, or who you really want to be? Are you who you truly want to be? And so when you move into a space where there is some interaction, you have an interpersonal relationship, and that's a one-on-one situation. And are you able to be intimate in that one-to-one space and create a collective identity that can function in an intimate space? Does your family interact with the world from a space of intimacy, or are they exclusive? Right? So when we talk about being inclusive and our family structures are built on exclusivity, we actually exclude the rest of the world, which actually fosters these types of systems. And I'm not saying that that people shouldn't have privacy. Privacy is one thing, intimacy is another thing. Keeping secrets and hiding and making things exclusive, locked door, VIP situations is exclusive. And if we're going to talk about being inclusive, then the paradigms of the way we do relationships in a whole might need to be shifted. And if we're talking about shifting an entire planet, we're talking about 7.5 billion people. If we're talking about shifting an entire planet, then it's going to have to start in our households. It's going to have to start in our interpersonal relationships. It's going to have to start in a relationship with the self. And that intimacy is really, really important, to know where you are, where you've come from, having awareness of that, having consideration of why you perform the way you perform, and then unplug yourself from the system within yourself. Then you can look outside. We found at Taco, we found that people are looking to remedy systems, and they have not adjusted, not fixed, because you're not broken, have not adjusted what's going on the internal environment of the human organism, of your individual human organism. And if you're looking to fix a system outside of you and haven't adjusted how you're managing yourself inside your body and inside your household, is really important. If you're oppressing your children, if you're oppressing your parents, you're being oppressed by your children or your parents in your house or your life partner or whatever, this is going to fortify these systems being stronger than ever, because it's still oppression. And so oppression, again, swinging it back to the beginning of what I was talking about, oppression is this overarching umbrella that racism falls under, that fascism falls under, that classism falls under. All of these isms fall under that. And so when you can see that space, it gets really, really interesting. And when you move into complicated societal constructs, devices, systems, corporations, countries, all of these things become really, really complicated, because you have multiple people with all these different vantage points that are not acknowledged. And the overarching vantage point says that this is what's right. And when you look at something like Freudian psychology, with the idea that all human beings are savages who have savage urges that need to be quelled and held back and tamed, it provides a structure that becomes very dysfunctional when a person wants to act a certain way, or feels compelled to act a certain way that is considered dysfunctional. right? By an overarching system. So when you look at these things, it becomes really interesting when we pull back and we don't allow ourselves to be intimate with ourselves, don't allow ourselves to be intimate with our interpersonal partners. We don't allow ourselves to be intimate with our business structures that we're creating, because the business is supposed to be this way, but this is how I really am. So I need to get money, so I'm going to be that way. It's a posture situation. And so when you look at posture, we bring in the human body. And when we bring the human body into the racism space, we start to consider racism as a posture. And that posture can be cultural, it can be ethnic, it can be religious. It's a posture, and it's a physical phenomenon. Whether a person is aware of it or not, it is a physiological phenomenon. And if you look at one family in contrast to another, people usually have postural similarities with how they hold themselves, with how, you'll see certain people have postures like this, or their bodies will barrel out. Posture is a habit that gets passed down genetically. And when you start to understand that, the not just the genetic physicalities, but the actual the habitual behaviors of a person can actually shape their body. So racism, when it gets built into people on autopilot, it doesn't have to be quote unquote racism anymore. It's just the way. Oh, it's just the way we are. I didn't know. You think that kids who were brought up in families that owned slaves during the slave trade knew that they were doing something wrong? They may not. This is just the way it is. They were told that black people weren't even human, right? Or they were 2/3 of a human, or whatever it is, whatever they said back in the days, right? These people were not considering this. When you go and you go to a farm and somebody is slaughtering a cow for meat, do you think that person feels something is bad? They're doing something bad, or they're providing themselves and other people with food. But then you have people who may be all plant-based who are attacking these people. Where is the consideration of this? And so it becomes a posture. It becomes an actual physiological posture when you believe something. And so this is where biology gets into the belief space. And there are multiple types of postures. There's psychological posturing, there's energetic posturing, there's physical posturing, there's social posturing, and there's financial posturing. You can posture with money, and you can posture like you have money, and you may not have money. And so when we look at these spaces, racism is very much a physiological phenomenon, and it shows up in the body, and whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, it shows up in the body. It's like, so here's an example of a posture showing up, of somebody being programmed into a posture. You have a child that's a boy, and from the moment, even before the kid's born, but from the moment the kid's born, you start putting trucks in their hand. You start roughhousing with them and pushing them really hard. We have a little girl, and it's soft, and you're giving dolls and all that stuff. You are actually creating a posture in that child so that they perform like a boy should perform, like a girl should perform. And so when they grow up, it becomes a normalized situation. Maybe not natural for those individuals, but normalized. And so there's a lot of pressure for them to perform within that posture. So their bodies actually take on the posture of what they've been taught. And racism works in the same fashion. When people are privileged, it works in the same fashion. And their bodies take on the posture, the energetic, psychological, physiological, social, and financial posturing that racism has been designed to provide a certain sect of people that are considered supreme. So so that's where it is. And so that's a huge part of what Rated R is built off of, and what we're doing with it. And so if you're interested in any of the stuff that I'm talking about, please feel free to hit us up and or go to talkhole.com and join us for this program. It's a pretty epic space to grow in and learn from. And yeah, so we also talk about diversity. So we talk about the levels of understanding how people delineate things. And so I'm going to take a breath. Good. And move into another space. So this space is the space around the idea of diversity and discrimination. So discrimination is, and I said this at the beginning, discrimination is how we all as humans, because as humans we have a gift amongst all animals on this planet of awareness of self, awareness of others, awareness of name, awareness of the I am space. And so when you utilize that awareness, it becomes really, 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 really awesome. And you can start to see things. And so you start to see things as different. I am me. You are you. He is he, she is she. They are they, we are we. There's a diversification. And the diversification is always from the self. Okay? From the self. When you, even if you're talking about religion, God is different than me. God is diverse than me. The trees are different than me. The floor is different than me. There is a diversity. There is a diversification. This is where we discriminate. I discriminate that this is my left hand and this is my right hand, right? So I can discriminate because of where my pinkies are located, because of my awareness of these things. I am discriminating, right? I can look at my skin tone and I can look at Cole's skin tone and I can see that Cole is lighter than me. So I am discriminating because Cole is lighter than me. I can also see that Cole's body structure is different. So I discriminate and I am able to see that she looks different to me and I'm attracted to that difference. She's female, I'm male. I have some propensities that I want to explore with that. That's discrimination. I am discriminating. I've taken the negativity out of discrimination and I've just applied that there are differences. And this is where diversity comes into play. When we discriminate, we observe diversity. We observe the diversity of the world. So discrimination is very, very important. Now, if you put a negative twist on it and say you are discriminating against me, that's one thing. So if we're going to be able to do that, we can say I'm discriminating against or I'm discriminating for. Discrimination is a tool that is being used. You can put a negative twist on it if you want. It's up to you. You can also put a positive twist on it. I am discriminating for this. I am discriminating for that. Right? When you're talking about humankind, you are discriminating for humankind. I'm just well, look at those elephants over there. So I think we should come over here where it's safe. That's a discrimination against the elephants for humanity. So let's get it together when we're talking about discrimination. Discrimination is something that is functional. Functional for what? Is it functional for oppression, or is it functional for bringing people together and observation of differences so that we can include, right? Oppression, inclusion. So this is where discrimination is really, really important to start to understand those dynamics of discrimination. So when we move from discrimination, we move into a space of bias. And bias is discrimination where you have a preference, right? So like I love women. Women are awesome. I have a bias to Cole. I lean into Cole because that's the person I want to be around more. So I have a bias. I am biased. I lean into that, right? If you bought apples and strawberries, right? I can discriminate by looking at the apples and the strawberries, but I really love strawberries. I have a bias, so I lean into strawberries. It doesn't mean that I go in with a hammer and start smashing all the apples because I love strawberries. I am biased to strawberries. I favor them. I include them because that is my preference. Not to exclude apples. I can have apples. I like apples too, but I prefer the strawberries. So this is where bias comes into play. And it's the same thing with people. If you have a kid, they walk into a room, it can be all sorts of different kids there. They may have a bias to the kind of kid that they want to play with. And that can be an energetic bias. That can be a psychological bias. That can be a physical bias. That can be a social bias. And when they get older, it'll probably be a financial bias too. Some people lean into people who got a bunch of money. Some people lean into people who don't. It all depends on the person and their circumstances. So when you can start to really look into that space of bias and understand that there's nothing wrong with discrimination, it's what are you using it for? And there's nothing wrong with bias. It is your propensity to lean into one thing or the other. And when you look at the next step in that space is bigotry, right? Now, bigotry is where you use your bias and your discrimination to oppress, right? To put down, right? Oh, I don't like white people, I don't like black people, or those people speak Spanish, I'm not trying to talk to them. That's bigotry. Okay, that is moving into a space of separation because of your bias, and you're using your bias to keep people separated. That is exclusion. So bigotry is an exclusionary process. Okay, bigotry is an exclusionary dynamic, and when you look at that space, that is where racism in and of itself really starts to gain its traction is when bigotry is applied. And it's like, yeah, all of these people in here, but you know what? Those black people have to stay over in the corner. They got to stay over in the corner. No. Everybody else is cool. Black people got to stay over there. No, they smell bad, or they eat, this, or they play basketball, whatever it is. That's bigotry. And so when you start to understand that bigotry is a tool of racism that utilizes discrimination and bias to move a particular type of person to the side and oppress them for convenience factors. And the convenience factors can be anything. The convenience factor can be safety. If certain people don't feel safe around other people, they will discriminate and use bigotry to move people out of the way, because safety is a convenience space. It is. And no matter how you look at it, safety is convenient. It's convenient to feel safe. I'm very convenient. If you're not safe, it's an inconvenience, right? So let's make those black people, or those Latinos, or those Asian people, or those white people feel unsafe so I can feel safe. That's convenience. And so this is where racism starts to really it starts to make a lot more sense, because it becomes less of a good or bad thing and more of a convenient for who thing. Who is this shit convenient for? And so when you start to peel this stuff apart and you start to delineate and start to understand that racism isn't a good or bad thing, it's a fucked up thing that serves to keep people oppressed for convenience factors. And when you start to look at the inconvenience that certain people are having, you can see this within yourself. Then you can move back into that space of awareness. You can move into that space of consideration, validation, right? Observation, then invitation and collaboration, and you can dismantle the shit within yourself, within your business structure, within society. And once you have that all put together, that's where the magic is. So understanding those dynamics. Discrimination, right? Discrimination is important. Diversity is the observation discrimination is the observation of diversity. It's the observation that things are diverse. Diverse from what? When you look at it, everything as an individual, as a sovereign individual, everything is diverse from you. When you ball yourself and bundle yourself up into a particular supreme space, and everything else is diverse from that, it becomes diversity on autopilot that may not be your sovereign diversity. So when you look at discrimination is a tool to observe diversity. And then when you look at bias is a lean into what you prefer, right? What you prefer. Some people prefer guys. Some people prefer girls. Some people prefer darker skin. Some people prefer lighter skin. You have a preference, right? It's okay to be biased. It's nothing wrong with it. When you apply bigotry, that's when it starts to become problematic. Are you being a bigot to put another person or people down at your benefit so as to oppress and cause convenience? And that's all. And we can discuss this until the cows come home. It's always about convenience. Racism is always about convenience. Oppression is always about convenience. When you have people, when you're talking about child sex slavery, it's about convenience of the people who are buying these sex slaves. It's about convenience. That's why these people are being oppressed. They're being oppressed for a reason. Why are these oppressions happening? What's going on? It's always about convenience. Ageism is about convenience. These older people move too slow, or they do this, or they do that. You should hear some of the shit that I hear about older people. It's oppressing for convenience situations. When you look at oppression, it is always fucking always about convenience. So when you look at that, you've got discrimination, you've got bias, you've got bigotry. Those are the tools of humanity that fall into the space that can be governed and controlled and manipulated by racism to provide a convenience factor for some people over other people, a person over another person. So it's an overarching situation. It's not just racism. It's all oppressive situations. And so, and then another thing that I wanted to talk about is prejudice. Prejudice is a prejudgment, and we all have prejudgments on things. If a person walks into a room with a gun, you can. I know I would judge. I can't say you. I know I would judge that person could shoot and kill me, and I don't know what anybody else's perception of a person with a gun is, but where I grew up, people would shoot each other in the street with guns. So guns make me nervous. So my prejudice is to be in an observation space, to never put my back to a person who has a gun, to always be able to observe this situation. That's my prejudice. It doesn't, and my bias is to be around people who don't have guns, because that's where I feel safe. Now, if I was to move into a space where I was discriminating against that person, I could say, well, that person has a gun, that's a bad person. That's me putting a judgment on a person. That person may have grown up with guns. They may hunt. I have no idea. However, I'm not intimate with that person. So how do I get intimate with that person? Does my nervous system allow me to get intimate with that person? How do I get myself to calm down and get into a space where I can actually discuss things? Or do I just shut him off? He has a gun, bad person, gonna shoot me, gonna kill me, rugged and raw. I'm not dealing. It's bigotry. Okay, it's bigotry. And so when you look at that, it's a space that keeps people separated. And prejudice is not a terrible place. It's just something that we do. So yeah, I'm gonna stop here for a few minutes, and I've been going for about an hour. So I love y'all. Thanks for listening to Instagram. I'm just here getting all this stuff together. Cole and I are talking. She wanted to record me on Instagram Live so y'all could get a gist of all of the shish that I'm working on. There's all of these things. Yeah, so I love you. Be easy, be free. Hit us up, talkcole.com. Follow us on Instagram @talkcole.